Grabbing headlines around the world in the international press with Flo Villamino back once again. Hello there.
Hi, Kat.
And we're going to start off with the elections in Brazil. Dilma Roussef elected by a whisker.
Just by a whisker, as you can imagine, it is the leading story in the Brazilian press. Let's start by looking at Folha de Sao Paulo. They talk about after the tightest race in Brazil's history, Dilma calls for unity and promises to start her second term with political reform. You can see a very smiley Dilma Roussef, who reportedly said yesterday that close elections often produce faster and bigger changes than easily won elections. O Globo, the Rio-based paper, is also focusing on her call for unity and promises for political reform. But in its editorial, it says that she's quite a paradoxical woman, because here she is promising unity, and yet in her victory speech, she didn't even once mention the name of her rival. That's O Globo saying that. It also comes back on the fact that it was a very bitter race between the two. Her victory was one with an aggressive political strategy, says O Globo, and this is very different from the peace and love strategy of her predecessor, Lula. Now, her challenges now are to calm down the radical elements in her Workers' Party that have gotten really riled up with this election. And O Globo says she also really has to bring about real improvements in public services like education, health, and safety.
I guess a big test will be if we see a return of those massive demonstrations that we've seen over recent months, won't it? We'll move on to more elections in Ukraine this time. Exit polls showing a victory for the pro-European parties.
That's right. Now let's start by taking a look at the leading article on the Moscow Times website. They focus on this. You can see it talks about how these pro-EU parties are leading the exit polls. The photo you see there is a Ukrainian soldier injured in fighting in the eastern Ukraine, casting a vote yesterday. Similar photo on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, which also says early lead for the pro-Western parties. Inside the Wall Street Journal, there's a very interesting article about the challenges that Kiev is facing, especially in the east, where, of course, there's been fighting with Russia-backed separatists. There was a trickle of voters yesterday, which is a signal of these challenges. There was a definite lack of enthusiasm for these parliamentary elections, says the Wall Street Journal, and this is a sign of suspicion of Kiev, and it also indicates difficulties that the new government is going to have in cementing the loyalty of these towns that they're not even sure to control.
And another big election happened yesterday in North Africa. We're talking about Tunisia, the country that sparked the Arab Spring. We called it the Jasmine Revolution back then, didn't we?
Absolutely. Now, we're still waiting for those results to come in, but there's a lot of hope all over the world, actually. I pulled out, first of all, this article in the Washington Post. Tunisia boldly embraces democracy. And it reminds us that Tunisia is where the Arab Spring kicked off 4 years ago. And so far, that revolution hasn't veered into a civil war or a renewed dictatorship, as we've seen happen in other countries that experienced the Arab Spring. This article is very hopeful, though it does point out that Tunisia still has a lot of challenges. The country is plagued by a stifling state bureaucracy, a poor education system, and general unemployment for youth. And the Washington Post also reminds us that a lot of people in Tunisia have been going to Syria and Iraq to fight the jihad.
OK, so that's the view from Washington. Of course, the United States has been a big cheerleader for democratic change in North Africa and other Arab countries. What about the Arabic papers, though?
Well, there's a lot of enthusiasm in Arabic papers. I pulled out two pan-Arab papers that are based in London. First of all, Rai al-Yum. It focuses on the fact that this election in Tunisia is proof that Islam and democracy are not incompatible. And it applauds the Tunisian political class as a whole. The country may be very divided between the ruling Islamist Ennahda party and their main opponents from the secular Nida Tunans party. But the campaign went on in a very democratic way. And this election, this paper says that Tunisia has learned the mistakes from Libya, Egypt, and Iraq. And I also pulled out a cartoon from Al Arabi Al Jadid, so another London-based Arabic paper. It says that Tunisia is the hope of the Arab Spring. And I'll describe what this cartoon represents. It represents a tree growing in a very hostile and arid land. But if you can see, one of its branches, just one, has little teeny leaves that are growing from it. And that is the branch where these Tunisian elections have taken place. So lots of hope, but quite a fragile situation as well.
Okay, let's finish on a positive note with a hug from Barack Obama.
That's right. Barack Obama is the hugger-in-chief, according to
Add that to your resume.
Add that
Barack.
to your resume. You can see a photo of him here in Slate magazine hugging the Dallas nurse, Nina Pham. She was the first person to be infected with Ebola within the United States. Kicked off quite a lot of panic all over the media. She was declared Ebola-free on Friday. Now, Slate says this is a heroic act from the U.S. president. With one hug, he displayed inspirational leadership, says Slate. Not only that, but he also promoted public health, fought bigotry, and helped calm a raging paranoia. So it might not seem like much, but this one hug is quite a big deal in the U.S.
One little hug goes a long way. Thanks very much, Flo Villamino, with a hug and a look through the international papers here on Life in Paris. Time for us to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to have updates on all our top news stories for you. Plus, we're going to have a look at our special report from Poland. The country's Jewish museum finally opening tomorrow with grand pomp and ceremony. We're asking, what does it mean in 2014 to be Polish and Jewish?